I think we've talked about the SEC playing 9 conference games. This has got to be 5-8 years. I mean, the Sabinator's been talking about this for years now. If you are the SEC, now more than ever need to play 9 conference games. And again, I think this is really significant. Chris Del Conte, the athletic director at Texas, said, we have 8 games scheduled right now. We're working on going to a 9-game schedule, but we have a ways to go with that. I would say this year we have an 8-game schedule. The following year, we will have another 8-game schedule. Then we'll look going at 9 games for a conference schedule. The SEC is not waiting for you to decide if you are in favor of 9 games. They're going to 9 games in 2026. And it's exactly the right move. And I look at this Tony Petitti, Yahoo Sports Ross Dellinger interview, where Tony Petitti's talking about how he wants his Big Ten teams now with this newly added depth. And again, what did I say about Texas and Alabama in the SEC? Can't we all say the same thing about Big Ten expansion? USC, Oregon, and Washington, UCLA, going into the Big Ten, that's 3 out of 4 of your new members that are power football programs. So what is Tony Petitti saying? Well, I want my universities playing college football games of note. If you have, and notice he didn't say Big Ten games of note. Tony Petitti said, even if you have 2 or 3 losses, we want your games in November to matter. Okay, well, let's take a step further from that. You now have a Big Ten SEC alliance. What if we get Alabama and Ohio State on Thanksgiving weekend? Tell me that that's not a game of consequence. Georgia and Michigan, Oregon and USC, and you're getting these marquee matchups not in September, in November. That doesn't impact your ability to make the college football playoff on its face, because you can still win your conference championship even if you lose that game. And if you win your conference championship and you're the Big Ten or the SEC, you're getting into the college football playoff. Now, if you beat Alabama, if you're Ohio State and you beat Alabama and you win, you're probably going to get a bye week.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old huge upside potential with minimal downside risk.
Yes.
Right? It's hey, if we win this, we're catapulting ourselves up the college football playoff ranks. And if we lose this, yes, it will hurt, but it still allows us to go out and win the conference. And I think that's the brilliance behind this thought. And I love the idea that these 2 conferences understand, hey, we do have the biggest brands in college football, and we should use that tool to set ourselves apart. And I think that's the X factor. This is what I've always said about the ACC and what was the Pac-12. The Pac-12 had a couple of big brands, but they were never the Big Ten or the SEC. And I think that the Big Ten, obviously, as we have gone back and forth about on this show forever, the Big Ten has always been known as playing a soft-ass schedule until the last 3 weeks of the season. So if we can take it from the last 3 weeks of the season to the last 6 weeks of the season, and you can mix in out-of-conference scheduling so your conference title is not at risk, I just don't know why you wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I think this is a really... We continue every week, it seems like, to have a and I don't want to use big words and drama, but these are transformational conversations. Like these meetings that are going to happen with the College Football Playoff Committee these decisions, they're going to 5-7. They're going to 5-7. Like we talked about this yesterday on the show. That you're in a situation where the college football playoff is going to put the 5 highest ranked conference champions into the college football playoff, and then the next 7 ranked teams into the college football playoff. That is a huge change. But do you really think we're staying at 12 for the long term? I don't think there's a chance in the world that 5 years from now, we're not at a 16-team college football playoff. There's too much money to be made.
Well, 16 is a really nice number, obviously. I think at 16, you're looking at it and saying, okay, this is obviously a lot more opportunity for the mid-table teams, right? I mean, I think with 12, you're going to get that scratch-in team who hovered between 15 and 20 in the nation most of the year. And maybe they got that signature win that they really needed, that they were an underdog in, and that kind of catapults them into that 12 seed. And I think the 12-team college football playoff is going to be really good. I think it's exactly what we need. I think it finds that balance between not being as long and drawn out as March Madness, the bracket, but it also draws it out long enough where we as college football fans get more of those big games, and we get more opportunities to talk about this team or that team under or overachieving. And I think that is what the big boys understand. Hey, if we can just play more of these leverage games, it allows us to be more in the news cycle, which helps our TV partners, which ultimately helps recruiting, NIL, portal situations. Like, it just helps everything to play big games and win on the field.
Yes.
And I feel like that thought and that idea is now coming more into focus than it's ever been. And for the ACC, if I'm the ACC, I would be using the word worried, because you don't really have a team in your conference right now, outside of Florida State, I guess, who can go in and at least be on the same field. I don't think that Clemson, we can say definitively, should be on the same field right now as, Alabama, Georgia,
not in football.
Yeah. So, to me, Florida State obviously had a tumultuous season, and I think we all agree they would have got absolutely torched in the playoff had Jordan Travis stayed healthy. But if you're the ACC, that's all you got. You only have Florida State. So what do you do as a conference to improve? Because you've always been basketball first.
Do you like this idea of scheduling marquee non-con games in November?
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I think, we always talk about on the show, as football fans, and me specifically as a football fan, I love the big time NFL matchup as we move into winter. This idea goes right down that same path. Hey, if we can get, that big time October, November game, and we can get 5 or 6 of those instead of 2 or 3 of those, I just don't know how that hurts you. I don't know how that, you're talking about cementing Heisman Trophy candidacy. You're talking about cementing individual awards. You're talking about just doing more business, essentially. And so I, as a fan, just as a pure observer of the sport, I love it. I want more Bama, Texas, Bama, LSU, or, whatever, Ohio State, whoever you want to point to. I want more of those games. I want more Washington, Oregon.
Yeah, I think there's very little downside to it. We already see historical matchups like USC and Notre Dame every winter, early winter, if you will, late fall. Those November games are huge. For viewership and fan interaction. I think that's what you need. If you have these one-off events, and it fits perfectly into the model that we're hearing about, where the big guys want to benefit the other big guys so that all the big guys benefit, right? That's what this is. And again, if I'm Alabama, I understand why you want to play McNeese State in November. I totally understand that. And this year, I think we saw that. But I think every college football fan would buy an extra beer and an extra ticket to see Alabama and Georgia. But wouldn't you also buy an extra beer to see Alabama and, again, Texas? Wouldn't you? Alabama, well, now they're in conference. Okay, well, the SEC is stronger. Well, how do we float the Big Ten up higher? Because I still think the Big Ten has a depth issue, even though that got better with expansion. But if we get to see, remember back in the heyday of Pete Carroll at USC, what did we see their first game of the year? Well, we saw USC travel to Orlando, I think it was, to play Auburn. That's a huge game. When you get a Pac-12 Utah traveling to the Swamp to take on Florida, those are big games that fans travel to. It makes more money for hotels, for hot dog vendors, for beer sales, for ticket sales. Everybody wins when you get big games. And when you have an undefeated versus a one loss or another undefeated, and if that is Michigan versus Georgia, I don't see how that's a loss for anybody. Because, again, those two teams, they're blue bloods. They're always going to recruit. They're always going to portal. They're always going to NIL. They're always going to send people to other venues to steal signs. It's what they do. That's probably a stretch too far. But my point is,
sign stealer guy.
It's what they do. They're always going to be in competition. They're always going to be at the top of the conference as a 1 or 2 loss team. So a loss to Michigan or a loss to Georgia in November is not the end of the world. But what it does is cement more power, if you will, amongst the SEC and the Big Ten. And again, I just ask, who's the marquee matchup in the Big 12? If I think it is unquestionably right now, it's Utah. And then I don't know either. And I think if I am the Big 12, that's my biggest concern. You've put so much money and effort into developing your basketball product that I think you clearly did not forget about football. And maybe I'm overstating it. I don't know. Like, am I overstating the vulnerability of Big 12 football?
No, I don't think you're overstating it. I think it's pretty clear. You don't have, again, it used to be that Texas and Oklahoma were your big boy nameplates and everyone else was chasing them. And the problem is, and I love Kyle Whittingham and I love Utah and I love what they find a way to do. They're going to compete year one at the top of that conference. And that's not a good thing for the Big 12, with all due respect. You need to have your competition in the conference should be better than that. And again, it's this thing that BYU's going through, right? Like, you look at BYU and they're trying to get over the hump still. You look at, again, it's like, which Kansas are we getting week in and week out? Are we getting the Kansas that beat Oklahoma? Or are we getting the Kansas that underachieves and disappoints?
Yeah.
Again, but you look around the conference, K-State, TCU, Kansas, Oklahoma State. What kind of year is the Mullet going to have this year? Because they started off rough this year and finished with 9 wins, I think it was. And you had no business being on the same field as Texas. Like, that's your problem. You're just not as good as these other conferences. So I guess the way that pans out for you, honestly, is, yeah, obviously your conference champion is going to get into the college football playoff, but can you get 2, 3, maybe 4 contenders working on the college football playoff so that when the ranking does come out, it's your conference champion and 2 other teams? Because if you can have 3 teams in the college football playoff every year, you really should be fine. You really should be fine. But it's those years where you just have one that really is not. It's that year where you have one in the playoff and then you don't do anything in the tournament. That's going to hurt you.
And I still maintain in terms of the Big Ten exclusively here, you look at Ohio State and Michigan, they're going to control their schedule. They're going to tell you, as they are now, I'm not going to LA. I'm not playing night games in the cold at home in November, which I think is really smart. Because if you're Michigan, you don't want to get Kliavkoffed and send USC to the Palouse on a Friday night to end their playoff hopes, right? Like, the Big Ten is smarter than that. And I think if you're the Big 12, you have to learn the lessons of your former ally, the Pac-12. And I think you have to steal the ideas of the SEC and the Big Ten in football. Because I don't think there's any doubt that Brett Yormark is a genius, but a high-level operator in business acumen. The Rucker Park stuff, the Mexico stuff, the basketball branding, separating those business units, brilliant. Now you have got to turn your focus. You've spent a lot of focus there. Turn your focus to Big 12 football. Turn your focus to Big 12 football and take from what Michigan and Ohio State do in the Big 10, which is, hey, we're going to play our game. And historically, they play on what? The last weekend of Thanksgiving weekend in November. That game's never going to change. But my question is, like, if I look at USC's schedule, USC always is going to have UCLA and Notre Dame to end the season, right? I think we all agree with that.
Yep.
Right? USC's got that big game built in to end their season pretty much every single year. This year, Notre Dame's on the last weekend of November. And it's in Los Angeles at the Coliseum. That's sizing up based on the recruiting and the rankings right now and the projections. That's sizing up to be a playoff impactful football game.